I'm going to share another helpful tool to add to your Resiliency toolbox. In each module and in our Tools and Techniques section, we unpack many evidence-based tools and techniques to help you become mentally stronger and more resilient. This technique is taken from the ACT, Acceptance and Commitment Therapy model. And it's a useful way to help you see through some of the mental noise, the chatter going on in your head, and rebalance your thinking and mood. It's called Defusion. Often, when we have a thought, feeling, or sensation, we may find ourselves strongly identifying with it. Sometimes, when we identify with something, it can feel like it overtakes us and becomes our identity. Someone might say, "I'm depressed," versus "I'm feeling depressed." Words are powerful. What you say to yourself matters. And even though it might seem like there's barely any difference between "I'm depressed" versus "I'm feeling depressed," the use of "I'm depressed" results in a stronger sense of personal identity than the statement "I am feeling depressed." The latter statement helps us identify or label a short-lived, momentary emotional state. However, saying "I'm depressed" is often experienced as a global, overwhelming personal statement about yourself. This is all I am, depressed, rather than simply observing that it is a feeling, emotion, or sensation. This tendency towards making the emotion our identity sets us up to wrestle with the thought or feeling, which we're trying to push away because we tell ourselves, "No, I'm not depressed. I'm not anxious or sad." The result is that we get caught up in an exhausting mental noise cycle that dances between identifying the emotion to "the emotion is my identity," back to identifying the emotion to "the emotion is me." This results in us fighting it out with ourselves as we try to de-identify with the thought or feeling. And this can be quite exhausting. However, there is a better way. Interestingly enough, our tendency is to do this more with our mental wellness than our physical wellness. For example, I don't think you've ever heard anyone say, "I am cancer," or "I am a headache." Most people say, "I have cancer," or "I have a headache." Why don't we do the same with some of the common colds of mental health? "I have depression" versus "I'm depressed." "I'm" is short for "I am," and like the "I am cancer" example, it can be experienced as a way of defining ourselves. It becomes our identity. We do this with other things as well. We often hear people say, "I'm an addict," which makes no sense. That's not who they are. It's more healing to oneself and the other person to say, "I have an addiction," or "you have an addiction." Do you notice the difference? It's a case of identity versus an issue to resolve. Another more familiar example is "I'm thirsty," or "I'm hungry." We often don't give this much thought, and we certainly don't intend to mean "who I am is hunger." It sounds weird, right? However, what often happens is when we think or say "I am," and perhaps over-identify with something we're experiencing, this can often create more emotional and physical pain. This was made clearer to me when I was actually learning a bit of Spanish. In English, we say "I am hungry." In Spanish, it is expressed as "tengo hambre," which means "I have hunger." It's "I have" versus "I am." "I have hunger" versus "I am hungry," or "I am hunger." "I have hunger" makes more sense, doesn't it? It is explaining an emotional or physical state or condition as an experience rather than one's identity. In this way, we are no longer getting stuck or fused and over-identifying with that state or experience. I invite you to think about a current stress that you might have, something that might be creating a bit of anxiety for you, perhaps at a level 4, 7 out of 10 level. Do you have a concern in mind? Okay, so now try on the following statements and see what you notice. I invite you to record this along with the thing you're most concerned about, as it will make the exercise more lasting and powerful. So let's begin. Take a moment and do the following. Say to yourself, "I'm stressed or anxious about and then fill in the blank. I'm stressed or anxious about, fill in the blank. What do you notice? Next, record or write out the same concern in the following way. I'm having a feeling of anxiety about, fill in the blank. I'm having a feeling of anxiety about, fill in the blank. What do you notice? And now say, I notice I'm having a feeling of anxiety. I notice I'm having a feeling of anxiety about, you fill in the blank. What do you notice? On a scale between 1 and 10, what was your level of stress or emotional charge regarding your concern? What is it now after you've approached and observed it in these terms? I notice I'm having a feeling of anxiety. Has the stress or emotional score gone up, stayed the same, or gone down? Now, unless this is a really tough issue that might be overwhelming you or has been deeply locked into your identity, most people say their score has gone down, even if only by half a point. If your score remains the same, perhaps try this exercise with a less overwhelming or lower score concern and see what happens. This technique is known as a cognitive diffusion, and it can be quite helpful in reducing the sense of emotional charge or overwhelm that we experience when stressed. I remember sharing this technique with one particular client who was dealing with a lot of stress that resulted in some extremely uncomfortable bodily sensations and tensions all over. After doing this simple exercise, their score lowered, and they were surprised to discover that they felt some relief from their symptoms. It was at this point that they decided that this tool was going to be their take-home action plan. A few weeks later, I met with them again, and they shared that although externally there was still a lot going on, they felt calmer, freer. So I checked in with their freedom score, their freedom from feeling overwhelmed by the physical sensations they were having. I began by asking them what their score was a couple of weeks ago. Low, they said, 2 out of 10. I asked, where is it now? A 7 out of 10, they replied. I asked, how did you do that? They responded by saying, I just took each concern I had as it came up and used the phrase, I notice I'm having this feeling, thought, sensation that. And their freedom score went from a 2 out of 10 to 7 out of 10. They also shared something else that I thought was quite powerful. They said that before they learned how to do this exercise, they felt like they were drowning in a large ocean, the ocean of their thoughts, feelings, and experiences. However, they said, now I feel like I'm safely high up on the shore, observing my thoughts and feelings from a comfortable distance. I encourage you to give it a try over the next few weeks. Just observe and see what you notice.